Before skyscrapers pierced the sky, before domes and cathedrals were even imagined, and long before the Great Pyramid of Giza became a symbol of Egypt's greatness, there was a structure that changed everything. A tomb, a bold experiment in stone. It wasn't built by slaves, and it wasn't built for glory. It was built to touch the heavens, and it was unlike anything the world had ever seen. But before we get to that incredible moment, we have to go back. Back to a time when pharaohs were still being buried underground, when Egypt was just starting to rise. The story begins around 2700 BCE in Egypt's Third Dynasty. The country had already been unified for centuries, thanks to kings like Nama and Horaha. It had survived political change, regional disputes, and transitions of power, but it hadn't yet become timeless. Not until a man named Djoser came to the throne. At this point, royal tombs were still being built underground. These early burials were called mastabas, low, flat, rectangular tombs made of mud brick. The word comes from the Arabic for bench, because that's exactly what they looked like. Inside these mastabas, kings were laid to rest with food, jewelry, and objects for the afterlife. They were buried deep in shafts, surrounded by chambers packed with goods. But none of it reached the sky. None of it made a statement from afar. These tombs were functional, but they weren't eternal. Djoser changed that. Or rather, his architect did. Because behind Djoser was a mind that changed architecture forever. His name was Imhotep. He wasn't a king. He wasn't a warrior. He didn't command armies or build an empire. But he left something behind that no one could ignore. Something that would echo for thousands of years. Imhotep was Djoser's chief architect, high priest, physician, engineer, and advisor, all at once. In a world where few names survived, his did. That alone tells you how remarkable he was. And together, Djoser and Imhotep would build a tomb that didn't just hold a body. It would redefine what it meant to be divine. It would rise. But before it did, before the first stone was laid, Egypt had to be ready. By Djoser's time, the kingdom had reached a new level of order. Administration had grown more complex. Officials managed tax records, grain storage, temple offerings. Art was becoming more stylized. The royal cult was growing stronger. And pharaohs were no longer just kings. They were seen as gods in human form. That belief, that the king was no longer just ruling in Egypt, but ruling above it, would shape the way he was buried. No longer was it enough to bury the king in the ground. Now, his tomb had to reach the sky. That was the challenge Djoser gave Imhotep. And the solution Imhotep came up with, the Step Pyramid, would change the world. Imagine standing in a desert where nothing reaches higher than a palm tree, and suddenly, before your eyes, a giant staircase of stone rises into the sky. That's what Imhotep built. At Saqqara, just southwest of modern-day Cairo, the sands began to shift. This is where Djoser wanted to be buried, not in Abydos like his ancestors, but here, in a new necropolis closer to the capital of Memphis. And Imhotep didn't follow the rules. He started with a mastaba, just like tradition demanded. A flat platform, long and rectangular. But then, he stacked another one on top, then another, and another. 6 levels in total, each smaller than the one beneath it. For the first time in history, a tomb wasn't flat. It reached up. It rose over 60 meters high, or nearly 200 feet. The Step Pyramid of Djoser wasn't just a tomb. It was a symbol. It was a ladder to the afterlife, a stairway for the divine soul of the pharaoh to ascend into the heavens and join the gods. But just as important as what it meant was how it was made. Imhotep didn't use mud brick, like every architect before him. He used stone, limestone blocks, quarried, shaped, and placed with precision. This was a material that had never been used for something so massive before. It was heavy, hard to carve, difficult to transport, but it lasted. And that was the point. Djoser's afterlife wasn't supposed to last a century. It was supposed to last forever. So Imhotep invented a whole new system of stone construction, including support walls, stepped layers, and ventilation shafts. He turned raw desert into a construction site and a tomb into an architectural revolution. But the Step Pyramid wasn't just the pyramid itself. It was an entire funerary complex. Inside a massive stone-walled enclosure, over 550 meters long, were temples, courtyards, ritual halls, and a serdab, a sealed chamber containing a statue of the king, so his soul could see the rituals performed for him. There was even a dummy palace, with stone versions of buildings Djoser used in life, a place where his spirit could continue his rule in death. And underground, an astonishing labyrinth of tunnels, chambers, and passageways, over 5 kilometers long, twisting beneath the pyramid. They held offerings, jars, furniture, and even thousands of tiny blue faience tiles designed to mimic the palace walls. It's one of the most complex burial structures ever built, and it was the first. All of this came not just from royal ambition, but from Imhotep's mind. He understood something new, that architecture could speak, that a building could say something about the man buried inside, and the world he hoped to rule after death. Djoser didn't live to see the pyramids of Giza, but without him, and without Imhotep, those would never exist. They laid the first stone path, and when the Step Pyramid was complete, it stood alone, the tallest structure on Earth at the time, a mountain of meaning. It wasn't just the tomb of a king, it was the birth of monumentality, and it made one man, Imhotep, legendary. It's rare for a name to survive 4,000 years, especially the name of someone who wasn't a king. But Imhotep wasn't ordinary. His name means, he who comes in peace. And while peace may have been part of his nature, his mind was built for vision, not war. And what he created changed Egypt forever. Imhotep wasn't just an architect, he was everything. He served as chief advisor to Pharaoh Djoser. He was a high priest of the sun god Ra. He was also a scribe, a doctor, and possibly one of the first known engineers in history. Some even credit him as the inventor of stone construction. In a world where almost no non-royal names were recorded, Imhotep's name was carved into stone, a rare honor. That alone tells us something. But the Egyptians didn't just remember him, they revered him. Centuries after his death, Imhotep was deified, worshipped as a god of healing and wisdom. His temples were built across Egypt. People left offerings at his shrines. Scribes prayed to him before starting their work. Even the Greeks would later identify him with Asclepius, their own god of medicine. No other architect in Egyptian history, not even those who built the Great Pyramid, would receive that kind of devotion. And yet, we still know surprisingly little about him. No autobiography, no detailed records, just fragments, mentions, traces left in stone and memory. But what's undeniable is the influence he left behind. After the Step Pyramid, every royal tomb would be shaped by Imhotep's vision. From the bent sides of Sneferu's pyramid, to the perfect angles of Khufu's, to the hidden tombs of the Valley of the Kings. They all followed the path Imhotep carved through the sand. Even Egyptian religious thinking evolved in his wake. Imhotep's combination of science, spirituality, and symbolism became a kind of blueprint for priesthood and temple architecture. He showed Egypt what was possible when the human mind met divine ambition. And what he built wasn't just a tomb, it was a message. That stone could defy time, that death could be conquered through design, that memory, when carved deep enough, could become immortal. Imhotep proved that you didn't need to be born royal to shape a civilization. You just needed to see something no one else could see and build it. The Step Pyramid stood tall over the desert, casting its shadow far beyond Saqqara. And that shadow would stretch into the future, guiding every king that came after. Djoser's reign ended with him buried in the heart of that great structure, his soul climbing skyward as his priests performed daily rites around him. But what mattered even more than his death was what followed. Other kings wanted pyramids too. At first, they tried to copy Imhotep's design. Sekhemkhet, Djoser's successor, ordered a step pyramid of his own, just southwest of Saqqara. But it was never finished. He died early, and the project was abandoned, buried under sand for thousands of years. Another king, Kaba, attempted a similar project at Zawiat al-Aryan, another step pyramid, unfinished. Again, we see the pattern. The idea was spreading, but the execution wasn't always successful. And then came King Sneferu, the founder of the Fourth Dynasty, and the man who would truly perfect pyramid construction. Sneferu was ambitious, and he had resources. He didn't just want a tomb, he wanted a monument to match his greatness. So he built not one, not two, but 3 pyramids, including the famous Bent Pyramid and the Red Pyramid at Dashur. The Bent Pyramid was a turning point. Halfway up, its angle changes, possibly because the weight began to shift, and collapse was a real danger. It was an engineering lesson, a bold experiment. The Red Pyramid, built right after, corrected those mistakes. Its perfect angles made it the first true smooth-sided pyramid in history. None of this would have been possible without Imhotep's first leap at Saqqara. The idea that a king should be buried in a visible, eternal monument, that he should ascend to the heavens on a crafted mountain of stone, all of that began with Djoser's pyramid. Even the layout of these later pyramid complexes followed Imhotep's blueprint, with temples, processional paths, and aligned axes tied to celestial movements. The fusion of religion, architecture, and astronomy became a hallmark of Egyptian royal construction. By the time Khufu, Sneferu's son, built the Great Pyramid at Giza, the idea had matured into something colossal. But even that world wonder, with its precision, grandeur, and mystery, was still, at its core, an evolution of the Step Pyramid. What Imhotep started wasn't just a new way to bury a king, it was a new way to express power, a statement in stone, a symbol of eternity, a king's stairway to the gods. And though later dynasties would move away from pyramids, hiding their tombs in cliffs and valleys, the pyramid shape itself never lost its meaning. Even today, it remains a universal icon of the ancient world. It all began with one idea, one king, and one genius who saw what no one else could. The Step Pyramid of Saqqara still stands, over 4,600 years old, weathered, chipped, but unmistakably there, tall against the desert sky. It's easy to be distracted by the more famous pyramids. The Great Pyramid of Giza gets the spotlight. Tourists, documentaries, mysteries. But Djoser's pyramid, that's the first heartbeat of it all. It was the first time humans turned stone into something truly monumental. Not for defense, not for shelter, but for legacy. And that makes it more than just a tomb. It's a declaration. It tells us that ancient Egypt, even in its earliest dynasties, was already dreaming beyond death, already imagining a kind of permanence that most civilizations didn't dare to reach for. This pyramid wasn't about fear. It wasn't about hiding from the gods. It was about meeting them on equal ground. That's what Imhotep gave to Egypt, a path to immortality. He fused architecture with religion, geometry with symbolism. He made stone do something it had never done before, express belief. And the Egyptians never forgot. Even thousands of years later, long after Imhotep's name had faded from daily speech, the memory of what he built still echoed. Temples were built in his honor. Doctors swore by his name. Scribes invoked him. His image was carved alongside gods. That's the power of ideas, when they're carved into stone. And Djoser, he may not have built the biggest pyramid, but he built the first ruler to rise above the earth and into myth. His monument was not a copy. It wasn't an upgrade. It was the beginning. So when we look at the ruins today, the broken limestone, the cracked corridors, the silent chambers, we're not just looking at a burial site. We're looking at a threshold, the moment Egypt stepped into eternity. And it all began with one man's vision and another man's genius. Before the pyramids touched the sky, before the pharaohs ruled with divine authority, before Giza, before glory, there was Saqqara, there was Djoser, and there was Imhotep,